And now we're going to take a closer look into the power of language.
Yes, it's a good one.
Words aren't just words. They shape perception, control conversations, and often have two meanings at once. When you hear a phrase, what's the image it creates in your mind? And more importantly, who puts it there? Let's dive into this.
Man, so this is actually a pretty interesting topic to me as I've been learning
this is one of your
power and importance of language, going back to the whole tyranny of should.
You being a man of many words.
So yeah, we have to be mindful, ladies and gentlemen, of the words that we're using to describe ourselves and the world around us, because that is giving those listening and observing us a bird's eye view of how we view ourselves.
Definitely.
So that's why language is important. Now, as Will kind of talked about, we have to be mindful that even though, for example, even though we're having a discussion right now between the two of us, and then obviously we're having a discussion between us and our audience, we're all operating from a different reality. So it's like, yeah, we're still talking to each other, we're still using the same words, but from a big, like I said, a bird's eye view, for if someone's looking down on us, it'll look basically like this image you see on the screen. Like everyone is operating within their own universe.
Their own galaxy.
Yeah, their own reality, as we like to say.
Right.
That's why it's important for us to effectively communicate. We can't just operate on autopilot and assume that because we're using a word that this individual that we're talking to, they understand the language that we're using. Because you can have the same word and it be pronounced totally different.
Yeah, words are important. Like you got tear. That could be a tear drop, or you could tear a piece of paper.
Right.
You know, you got read, or it could be read. You know, the past tense of read. You got live, or it could be live. You got polish, or it could be Polish.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So you got resume, or it could be resume. You know, you got close, as close in proximity, or you could close the door. You got present.
Facts.
Or present. Yeah, you got present or present. You got a record, or you could record something. You could be in the desert, or you could desert someone. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's crazy.
Yes,
it's crazy. You know how language is, and I heard someone say they call it spelling because you're inevitably casting a spell. So that's why they call it spelling. You know, so when we speak, we're casting spells. So with that line of thinking, we definitely have to be mindful of what's coming out of our mouths, especially as we refer to ourselves.
Yes.
And our families and what we want for our lives. You know, the whole manifesting thing, that's real.
Very much so. That's very metaphysically real.
It's very metaphysically real, you know, and we speak things into existence. You know, the Bible says, you know, speak things as not as though they were. And then it also talks about in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and it was with God. Not to say that this is a religious thing, but, you know, these are different references to word
and the power
and
of
the power of word. You know, in the beginning, God created. He said, "Let there be." He said. That means He spoke. There was a word that made things shift and happen, and atmosphere change. So we have that same power. If we're created in the likeness and image of God, come on, I'm preaching now. We have that same image,
right?
And power and authority to speak things as that are not as though they were.
I'm picking up what you're putting down because you are another one that they have in the Bible was write the vision and make it plain.
And make it plain. So that goes writing and speaking.
Because language is both visual and auditory.
Yes, it is.
And I would imagine that there is some sort of auditory frequency from when we say certain words. So if I say I'm feeling good, I'm pretty sure that has a different frequency on our body than I feel bad.
Oh, definitely.
Or I feel good has a different frequency than I feel bad. But again, as we said, we're speaking that into existence by using that language or those words. As well as when we're talking to people, we might be talking to somebody and saying like, you know, oh man, I feel bad about this, da, da, da. But again, bad could be both, you know, a positive thing as in like, oh man, that's a bad chick right there. Or I felt that was a bad, or it could be bad as in, you know, some sort of negative behavior. Like, oh, they were acting up in class, they were being bad.
And if you're from Philly, you know, we have a term called John, and that could be anything.
Right.
John, you know, that John could be anything you're talking about. So, you know, you got to be on point and know what you're talking about.
So is it safe to say that, well, we do know this is to be true, but when you travel to different areas of the world, again, you can have the same word, but it can mean something totally different.
Yes. Yes, it could definitely mean, and that relates in social constructs, religion, and neighborhoods. You know, you could be in a quote unquote Crip neighborhood, and the different slang that they use is totally different to what they might use in a Blood neighborhood. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I hate to use that as an example, but I'm just saying, just to, you know, to keep it plain, keep it real. You know, like. Words have double meaning all the time. You know, double speak is something that is definitely real.
I was just about to say, let's bring up that point about double speak, because again, double speak is something that is happening on a daily basis that we all aren't necessarily aware of.
Right.
So as it says, what is double speak? We hear and read double speak every day, but what exactly is double speak? Webster's dictionary defines it as evasive, ambiguous, high-flown language intended to deceive or confuse.
Wow.
So this is most of why we ultimately really wanted to talk about the power of language, especially now in the political landscape that we're in. You know, we have to be mindful that at all times there's agendas at play.
Right.
Everybody got an agenda, but do you have an agenda? Because if you don't have an agenda, then you might fall victim to the politician's agenda.
Right.
Because as we kind of see now that with the changes in the language and how they reference stuff, the politicians are now starting to realize that, hey, you know what I'm saying? Like we gotta change it up. We gotta rebrand, you know, our language, our terms, our words and everything, because again, the people they starting to catch on.
Yeah, I like that post you said, like where you know they like we just seen they starting to catch on. We got to change things.
Yeah.
You got to start speaking over their head. You know what I'm saying?
You got to create new language. So that's what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen. That's why language is important, because every day new language is being created that you might be thinking that they're saying what they're saying, but they're actually saying something totally different from than actually what you think that they're saying. But you think they're saying what they're saying because they're using a word that you believe you understand.
I was, you know, to prove the point about language, you know, there were, you know, is this, and this will lead us into our next segment, or we could talk more about it then. But the point here I want to talk about is language, how they changed the language from transgenderism is no longer a mental health thing. And so they changed the language, you know, to make it seem like it's a sexual health thing. And it's something that's that is caused by peer pressure or society and things like that.
Wow.
Yeah, you know, and it's crazy how they just changed the wording.
They changed the language, right?
They changed the language to make it more encompassing of anybody who choose to identify as that, whatever the case may be. So I found that very interesting as we was talking about language and double speak and how words can, you know, either they changing things. You know, our great President Barack Obama, you know, during his tenure, a lot of those things were implemented and changes were made for as languages as regards to mental health. And
so, Mr. Alexander, you mean to tell me that with the stroke of a pen, a whole lexicon of language and what it meant was redefined?
From a stroke of a pen, the DMC-5, I think that's the acronym for it, they were able to eradicate body dysphoria.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
They like transphoria. I don't think I heard that one before.
You know, leave it to me to fuck something up. But they were able to alleviate that because before, to get for you to get gender reassignment surgery, it was classified as a mental health illness. Okay. And you had to go through all these psychological and talk to these psychiatrists and things and go through all these.
Like a little evaluation.
Get evaluated to make sure that you wasn't making this decision based on depression, low self-esteem, or anxiety, or being bullied, right?
Okay.
So it was a mental illness. And so that's why a lot of people didn't go all the way through with these transitions because they found out.
Okay.
You know it. You know,
So it was the language. They learned about the language.
They learned about the language, and that's why.
And what it would. What and the image or the impression it would give off.
Come on now.
Yeah.
So that's why they changed it to make it a little more looser, so it could, people could be more,
more
privileged.
inclusive.
Yeah, more inclusive and more, privileged to consider this as a right or something that they should be entitled to do.
So the same way governments use language to change the images and futures of their citizens, guess what? We can do that in our own households.
Yes.
We can use our language to reimagine a whole new future for ourselves. No different than every politician around the world. No different.
No different. And this leads us that's a great segue into our next topic.